Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to master your music in just 3 simple steps. We're going to be talking about mastering today, but before we dive in, if you are ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process, step by step, to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any of the hassle and without any of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and talk about 3 simple steps to mastering your music. Step number 1 is getting your volume set. So that means pulling your mix up to a commercial level with a gain plugin, or here in Studio One, you could use the mix tool plugin. You could even use the fader on the individual track. Whatever you're going to do, it's just about pulling your track, pulling your mix up to a commercial level. So we're going to listen to the outro of this song here, and I'm going to pull in the mix tool, and we're going to start pulling this track up. For me, it's pretty standard that it's going to be about 6 dB. So I mix about 6 dB down from 0. I use the K system metering, so I mix at K20. So if I'm hovering around 0, I'm good. And then I master at the K14. So all that means is I'm pulling my mix up 6 dB to be at a good, healthy master. So that's where I'm going to be sitting, and I'll show you here on the K14 meter, and we'll also talk about LUFS here in a second as well. I'm going to hit play and pull this mix up to a commercial level. So mind your ears, it will get louder. So that right there is perfect for me. So if you're using Studio One, you could definitely use the K system metering. It's very helpful for me just to mix at K20 and then master at K14. I always know I'm going to be pushing up about 6 dB in my masters. But if not, watch your LUFS meter when you're mastering. So anywhere between about -14 to -13 LUFS is going to be perfect. I like to sit between about -13 and -12.5 is usually pretty healthy for me. -14 on the lower side, -12 on the higher side, depending on the type of music. So if it's heavier music, I'll push it a little bit higher there. If it's softer music, folk music, I'll keep it a little bit back towards -14. It's just dependent on the music for me. But anywhere in that area is going to be a good, healthy level to send out to streaming, Spotify, iTunes, what have you. If you're going to burn a CD, that works as well too. I'm going to play one more time, and I'm going to switch over to the peak RMS meter, and you can watch where we're sitting peak-wise here. Let me back up. So you can see where our peaks were sitting, right? They were sitting at about -2, -1. That's where I have my ceiling set. We'll talk about that in a second. But the RMS, we're sitting around -11.5, which is usually where I want to be, between 11 and -11 and -12. Sounding perfect for me there. So that's our peak in RMS. Now, when we're pushing up our level here, you want to get your limiter in place too. So this is still, step 1 is setting your volume to a commercial level. That means bringing up the gain and getting your limiter in place. For me, the limiter is as simple as putting on a brick wall limiter and setting the ceiling to -1. I know some people push it a lot hotter. Some people do -0.1. To me, that's just a little scary. You don't know what's going to happen when you bounce down to an MP3. If someone takes your WAV file, a lot of streaming services convert your WAV file to an MP3, and then with that compression going down to an MP3, you don't know if you'll get any clipping with that 0.1 dB of headroom you left. So I like to leave it at -1, which I think used to be the iTunes standard for mastering. I'm not sure if it still is for streaming or for iTunes or anything like that. But -1 is going to give you enough headroom that if anything does happen, going down to an MP3 or converting the file anywhere, whether it's at Spotify or iTunes or Deezer or any of the Amazon Music, it's going to give you enough headroom that you'll be safe and nothing crazy will occur. And you can see we're only hitting the limiter by a dB and a half. That's when our peaks are happening up at -1 there, because that's our ceiling. So that's step one, getting your limiter in place and bringing your level up with a gain plugin or the mix tool plugin or even your fader so it's at a commercial level. So anywhere between -14 to -12 LUFS and sitting around -11, -12 RMS and -1 at peak. Okay? And again, if you want to use the K20 or K14 meters, that's helpful for me as well. Mixing at K20 and then mastering at K14. So that's how I know I'm only bringing my track up 6 dB. So that's step number one. Step number two is EQ. So let's pull in an EQ here and we'll take a listen to our track. Oh, just duplicated that plugin there, huh? We'll take a listen to our track and see where we're sitting EQ-wise. I usually don't have to do too much work. It's just one of the benefits of mixing and mastering your own music. You get the mix sounding the way you want to, and it's just dealing with the increase in volume and how the frequencies react to that. I like to put my EQ before the mix tool. That way I have a control over the level on the output rather than before these plugins here. So let's hit play here. Excuse me. And we'll take a listen. We'll work on our EQ here. Gentle moves here during mastering because you have to keep in mind we're affecting the entire track. So small moves go a long way. I'm pretty settled with this here. Little boost at 40. I wanted a little bit more sub information from the kick and the bass just to give the track some more weight. So that's there, just a half a dB at 40 hertz. So small, subtle moves go a long, long way with the entire track like this. Then I put a little bit more air up on top. I wanted to hear that on the background vocals when they're cascading like that. Hearing that nice air at 8K was really, really nice. So just a half dB there at 8K. And then emphasizing the mid-range on the guitars. It's a nice big stack of guitars. And the mid-range is what you're selling on electric guitars. So about a half dB at 1.41K, anywhere in this 1 to 2K area is going to give you that mid-range emphasis on electric guitars, which is really, really nice. And I narrowed the Q up so it's not reaching too much down towards the mids or too much up into the high mid area. So it doesn't get too harsh there on the guitars as well. Just a bump in the mid-range. That's our EQ. That's step two. So step one, getting your level set to commercial level. So that means limiting and bringing up your gain. Step number two is EQ. So any kind of boosts or cuts that you need to do to deal with the increase in volume. I wanted a little bit more sub, a little bit more air, and some emphasis on the mid-range on the guitars there. Step number three is compression. Now this can go a couple different ways. What I like to use is a multi-band compressor. But you can pull in a regular compressor as well, and we'll talk about that too. We'll start with a normal compressor. Something you could use, which would probably sound really nice, is an SSL style bus compressor. So let's put this all the way up. We're going to go 2-to-1 ratio, so pretty gentle. slowest attack, fastest release. So we're at 100 millisecond release, 30 millisecond attack. We don't need any makeup gain here. Let's pull this down. I'm just going to kiss it. Just maybe a dB here of compression. That's it. That's it. Using a mix like this, you don't want to go too hard with the compression and mastering, especially depending on the genre. If it's a folk song, you want to leave some of those dynamics in. If it's a pop song like this or pop rock song like this, kind of a vibey track, a lot of electric guitars, you don't want to go too much with it, but a dB or so of compression can go a long way to even out the track overall. And something like this, an SSL style bus compressor, gives a little bit of fatness in the low end, which is going hand in hand with that EQ boost that we did. If it's a heavier song, you probably wouldn't need any compression at all. A wall of heavy rock guitars is going to be compressed enough in a track. So keep that in mind as you're adding compression. This is one way you can go with compression. We're going to disable that for a second and pull in. Something I like to try every now and then is a multi-bend as well. It doesn't always work the same way a regular compressor doesn't always work. And I have my standard setting here. It's a mix bus setting. I used to use it on mix bus, but I've started using it more in mastering here. It's divided into 3 bands, and they're all the same settings here. So they're all 100 millisecond attack, 100 millisecond release. So really, really slow attack, medium slow release. It's a very, very gentle style compression. 2-to-1 ratio again, keeping it gentle. And the threshold is at -20. So this is something I don't usually touch. Maybe I'll bring it up a little bit. Maybe I'll bring it down depending on the volume of the track. But usually right in this area is pretty nice. And then our bands are 0 to 160. So everything below 160 hertz, 160 to 2.5K, and then 2.5K and above. And I keep them all, edit all relative. So they're all same settings. And I pull them down all together. So I'm going to start with this middle band here. That's where I'm going to use the control settings. You'll see all of these bands move together. Just a little bit of compression, and it balances everything out in a really nice way. This might work hand in hand with the EQ and give us a nice low bump, nice high bump. It might tuck our mid-range back too much. We will see here. Let's hit play, and we'll see what it's doing. That's actually really, really nice on this track. So it's doing the opposite of what I thought it would do. I thought it would work harder on the mid-range. It seems to be working harder on our kick and our snare hits, which is really, really nice. It helps the vocal feel like it's a part of the track. So listen one more time. When I disable the multi-band, listen to how our vocal kind of feels disjointed from the track. And when I kick it in, everything feels like it's working as one whole package. Just helping everything glue together a little bit more. This will work hand in hand with your mix bus compressor, which is why it used to go on my mix bus, but I've started erring towards using it on mastering, so using it on the end of the process here. Just that little bit helps even everything out, whether you have too much mid-range or maybe your kick's a little bit too hot. It's going to balance your track overall. Last thing we'll try here is we'll try putting the fat channel compressor or the SSL style bus compressor in after the fact here, and we'll adjust it one more time. Maybe we'll get some of that weight back on the kick that we're losing from the multi-band. We're not really losing weight, but it's working harder on our kick. So let's see if we can get some of that back with this compressor here. Maybe they won't both work together. Sometimes it's one or the other. Sometimes it is both. It's just messing around a little bit. We're gonna hit play here and see if it is both. Now that feels a little bit too squashed for me, so we're going to nuke the SSL style bus compressor. We're just going to rock with the multiband. So that's our 3 steps there. Step 1 is getting your track, your mix up to a commercial level. So setting your limiter. Ceiling's just at -1 here. Then pulling in a gain plugin. Again, I like to keep this at the end of my chain. And pulling your gain up till you're at about hitting that -1 ceiling. I like to keep the RMS between -11, -12, and same kind of area with the LUFS. So anywhere between -12 and -14 is a good, healthy level for streaming, for CD, for release. Step number 2 is EQ. On this track, I wanted a little bit more sub information. So some weight on the kick, some more air on the background vocals. That's our 8K boost there. And then another half dB to bring out the mid-range on the guitars. Keep in mind, subtle moves here on the EQ because you're affecting the entire track. Last but not least, step 3 is compression. Whether it be a regular compressor, an SSL style bus compressor, or a multiband like this. Try both, see what works best for the track. Keep it subtle. You saw with the SSL style bus compressor, we were doing barely a dB of compression because it's working on the entire track. It's just to glue everything together, give you a little bit of balance overall. Same kind of idea here with the multiband. We're going everything below 160, 160 to 2.5K, and then 2.5K and above. Gentle settings, 100 millisecond attack, 100 millisecond release, 2-to-1 ratio, and we're only doing about a dB to maybe 3 dB of compression on that kick and snare hit, and you hear it balances the track overall. I hope that was helpful for you, hearing those 3 simple steps to mastering your music, whether it's in your home studio or in your pro studio. 3 simple steps here to master your own music. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflows as an engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.